I'm really not sure,
the man said, while he was staring up at that picture on a wall full of cobwebs, flaking paint, and stains he didn't want to know the origin of. This house looked, felt, and even smelled off. Hardly anything seemed to fit well together, starting with the furniture to the completely mismatched doors and even the weird layout. Twice he had gotten lost already, and that in a 2-story building. He shifted his weight, heard the floorboards beneath him groaning, then took a step to one side before he did another forward. The eyes in the picture kept following him. It was creepy, offsetting. And what bothered him most of all, it definitely wasn't one of those optical illusions. The eyes of the man inside the painting weren't in the center, but in the upper right. Yet they seemed to follow him anyway, as if the thing were alive. Art pushed the glasses back up his nose, shook his head softly, then stepped back until he stood squarely in front of the thing. This piece here bothered him the most out of everything else he had seen. Was it because it looked and felt so off? No. But it was the only piece in this whole godforsaken house that gave off the feeling that someone had taken care of it. There wasn't a speck of dust on the painting itself or on the frame. It wasn't hanging crooked, but perfectly even. There were no nails or cobwebs anywhere close to it, and those stains everywhere else were nowhere near it either. If one only looked at that small part of the house, one might think it was a building well taken care of. What a strange coincidence. No, not a coincidence. This was deliberate. He could feel it, even if he couldn't prove it. But who would leave a house in complete disarray and only clean this single spot? That truly sounded mad. Art lowered his gaze and looked up and down the hallway. There were no footprints in the dust beside his own. No sign of anyone walking around this place for at least a year, maybe more. Then how? Was this some kind of phenomenon? Some weird way the air circulation in these old halls worked? Or was there something more sinister going on? Whatever it was, this spot here just bothered him. If he closed his eyes, he thought he could feel cold air brushing past him. And once he concentrated on the noise around him, there seemed to be strange whispers throughout the normal sounds he heard in such a place. Art wasn't too happy about that and hoped those problems would disappear on their own once he was done selling that place on. He took another step back, watched the eyes follow him again, then grabbed his phone from his pocket and made a note. Creepy painting, hallway, 2nd floor. Might be worth something at auction. Or he could try and sniff out a buyer on his own. There might be someone willing to spend a few $100 on art of a guy in an old-timey suit with angry eyes that followed the viewer. He lifted up his phone, took a few pictures, then put the device back into his pocket. There were ways to find people who were into that kind of stuff today that hadn't been available to normal house flippers like him even 10 years ago. At least in that regard, modernity played into his hands. Art finally managed to turn away from the painting, wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans, and slowly walked along the old, partly rotten-through boards of the hallway. The stairs down should be over there, he thought, turned, and then found himself staring at a blank but stained wall. No, wait. He shook his head, tried to remember where he had come up from, gave off a loud sigh, then turned around completely and walked in the other direction. The painting passed him by again, but he hardly gave it a glance. It was enough that he thought he could feel the man's gaze following him once more. And now, if he looked up, he knew it would completely ruin his mood for the rest of the day. So, he kept his eyes down as he walked back, and then in the other direction. The stairs had to be somewhere around here, he joked to himself, although his mood had decidedly soured these past couple of hours.
Just buy one of those cheap abandoned houses, flip it, and make a nice tidy profit.
He repeated out loud, the sarcasm dripping from his voice.
What a great idea.
Whoever had sold him this piece of garbage probably was laughing somewhere right now. Yeah, he hadn't paid anywhere as much as the houses around these parts were going for. But spending even a single buck on this place had been a mistake. No. Art pushed his glasses up his nose, turned, and finally found the stairs. He mustn't think like that, he told himself. Even though it looked hopeless now, once he got rid of the old furniture littering the place, redid the floors and painted the walls, he'd be able to pay back that damned loan and make a ton of money. But he needed to stay positive for that to work. Otherwise, he would probably despair and run away from his problems yet again. Only, that wasn't an option now. He was in too deep. His life would be over if he didn't finish what he started this time. Art descended the stairs, then forced himself to look around the hallway down at the first floor, and his heart sank again. The walls here were almost as stained and dirty as the ones above. The floorboards had a completely different shade, and he knew that at least 2 of the rooms down here still had carpeting that would have to be ripped out. This place held a mountain of surprises in store for him, he thought, and felt a bead of sweat running down his back and soaking into the shirt he was wearing. What about the wiring? The pipes? All the trash he would need to get rid of? Getting professionals in here would cost him, and he would first have to take a closer look at the budget to know how much of it he'd need to do himself to still at least break even. He could feel his lip quivering at the thought, stopped his feet and sank down. Had he just ruined his life with that purchase? Art could feel those doubts overwhelming him. No, it wasn't like that. Those things just looked insurmountable at first. All he needed to do was make it through one day after another. First, he should get a clear layout of the place with a rough estimate of how much work was to be put into each and every room. Then he could start the project in earnest. Just one room after another, and everything would fall into place. Yes, that was the only way. He had time, at least. Art stood back up, shook himself off, and then walked around the house until he found the entrance again, left it behind, and went to his car. Driving down the road, he got himself something to eat at a diner while feeling the stares of the people on him now, as if he were an unwelcome intruder, then headed back out to that house so many local legends were whispered about. He spent the rest of the day going from room to room, taking notes of the state of the floors, walls, ceilings, and cleanliness. Started moving around any furniture he could still lift and peeled off strips of wallpaper wherever possible. His arms and legs started to hurt before the sun could even set, and the sweat running down his back had long since turned his nice shirt into a stinking wet rag. Art wanted to test out the bathrooms, but just as he feared, the water coming out of the showerhead would probably only make him sick instead of helping him wash the stench off. That grey-brownish color, together with the odor, made him immediately turn off the tap again, then look for the only alternative he could think of. Out there behind the house was an old pump which, after half an hour of work, finally started sputtering out cold, clear water. It wasn't his most dignified moment, he had to admit, as he stood there, almost naked, pouring cold water over himself, then washing his shirt, but at least no one else was watching him. And it gave him an urgent reason to get the water pipes in the house fixed, Art thought, as he finally finished with his shirt, and for the first time that day, a real smile came over his lips. He gave himself time to enjoy the moment, knowing full well that the horrors would set in again sooner or later. Quickly, Art slipped back into his car, which stood right by the front door, and, not wanting to spend the night in a bed that could give him either a rash or something worse, settled in on the back seat and took a deep breath. The sun had already set, his muscles ached and he felt woozy. But all in all, he told himself, it had been a productive day. At least for a first one. He tried to stop himself from thinking about the house as he turned his face toward the seat and steadied his breathing. This old, banged-up car would soon be replaced by one of the top-line models of the more expensive brands. Everything would work out in the end. He just needed to keep the hope alive. Art shivered slightly and felt a tear building in one eye as he pushed down all the negative thoughts and finally managed to fall asleep, thankful for the exhaustion for once. But his dreams were strange, weird. He found himself walking through the house again. Only this time, it was pristine. White walls, dark floors. There was no flaking paint, no mismatched wallpaper in any of the rooms. No old stained carpets on the floors. There were even curtains on the windows and a nice smell flowing through the hallways. It was just like he had imagined it could look. Such a place was worth a lot of money, and people would line up to buy it from him. All his doubts and his anxiety melted away as he lost himself in the beauty of it all and looked around as his feet carried him up the stairs to the second floor. This place was perfect, he thought. All he needed to do now was to get a realtor in here and start selling it. He reached the upper floor and heard the floorboards creaking loudly beneath his feet. Suddenly, the whole scene changed. Everything here was even more desolate than before. Some of the floor was missing, the walls had deep grooves in them, and dark moldy spots almost completely covered the rest. Cobwebs were hanging down from the ceiling, touching the floor in some places, while the light bulbs around him were flickering. Art shook his head in disbelief, wanting to turn back and run, but his feet carried him forward into the hallway, where the doors to his left and right didn't just stand open. No, they hung from their crooked hinges. He took another step and felt the whole floor slowly sinking. The house would collapse. It would bury him beneath the rubble. Art could feel sweat breaking out on his back again as a cold breeze brought with it an ungodly stench. This place wasn't meant to be lived in. It was a death trap, one that was about to swallow him up. He could feel the fear inside his mind and body. His legs were shaking, his fingers trembling. With every step he took, he seemed to get more and more frightened. But something pulled him in anyway. It was like he wasn't in control of his body at all. Art looked around. The walls were getting even more grimy. Through the hanging doors, he could see rooms overflowing with filth, and the stench that was wafting toward him almost took his breath away. He closed his eyes, unable to bear it any longer, then suddenly felt his feet stop in the middle of the hallway. This eerie chill gripped him as the sensation of someone watching him set in.
And who do we have here?
This smarmy, arrogant voice suddenly said, forcing him to open his eyes and look ahead. The picture was there. It was almost the same as when he had seen it during the day. Almost. The man in the painting was slightly different. There was a mocking smile now on his lips. The one hand formerly behind his back was now hanging at his side, and the whole body had been turned. He could see the old leather belt, and sticking out from it a small handle.
I ask for your name, young man.
The voice appeared again, right in his head, and Art felt his body trembling. Was this real? No, this had to be a dream. He remembered lying down on the backseat of his car, closing his eyes. Art looked down at his own body and could see that he was still only wearing his boxers, just as he had when he had drifted off to sleep.
Did no one teach you any manners?
The man's voice cut through his thoughts, anger now apparent in it. This shiver running through his whole body almost made him stumble, and he forced his eyes back up toward the picture.
Art. My name is Art.
He replied finally, pushing up his glasses with two of his fingers. The smile on the painting's face was no longer there. Instead, he could now see that strange man staring down at him with blatant disdain.
What a lowbrow name. So, why have you dared enter my home without permission?
Art could hardly comprehend the words. He was still shivering, now feeling completely exposed and bewildered. How and why had he come here? Wasn't this a dream? Or was he suffering a mental breakdown right now? The man was staring down at him from the picture, piercing him with his eyes.
This is my house. I bought it. I own it.
Art stammered, then watched as the paint started to run and move, making the eyes narrow, as the slight smile turned into a frown.
Your house?
The voice thundered in his head, aggressive, cruel, and full of malice. Art staggered backwards, felt his back touch the greasy, warm wall on the opposite side of the painting. The colors were running again, shifting, as it looked like the man was starting to move. He was pushing his head forward until it was at the center of the picture, his eyes now burning with this indignant rage. Even though the wet stickiness of whatever was on the wall and now his back should have made him retch, Art hardly noticed. His whole attention was on the painting in front of him, where he watched the two hands of the man grabbing the frame from the inside, the mouth now open in a sneer.
This is my house, my home. I would not invite some gump like you, and you think I let you, a scullion, steal it away from me?
The canvas of the painting seemed to ripple as something moved through it, and Art almost screamed as he saw a pale hand coming out of the picture, gripping the frame outside the portrait. A dark shoe followed as the man stepped out of the picture, the long leg reaching down to the floor. He could see the frame shaking, but couldn't even move a muscle. His mind had gone completely blank, as something impossible was happening right in front of his eyes. The man was stepping out of the portrait, pulling himself free and into reality. This was a dream. Nothing but a nightmare. Art closed his eyes, unable to bear the sight any longer. He needed to wake up. Now! A second shoe stepped onto the floor, just in front of him. Hot breath blew right in his face.
Lighter!
The voice hissed.
Thief!
It growled. A hand, big and cold, closed around his neck and lifted him off the floor, and Art could feel his vertebrae popping as his whole body got pulled up. He opened his eyes and stared right into the angry gaze of the man from the picture, whose tall, lanky body had now fully emerged.
You will not take it from me.
The man, now face to face with him, almost up by the ceiling, barked. Art gripped the two hands holding him up. They felt like marble. He couldn't take another breath as his feet kicked uselessly in the air.
This is your last warning. I should split your nose so people know what a scoundrel you are by sight.
Ard tried to say something back, but the hands around his neck pressed against his Adam's apple, cutting off the words before they could leave his mouth. The giant man started shaking him side to side, and Ard could feel this stinging pain radiating out from his spine with every move. He tried to scream, but only a whimper came from his throat.
Get out. And if I catch you again, I will make you rue the day you were born.
The man barked at him, then threw him through the air. Ard crashed to the rough floor, could see stars in his eyes, and tried to lift his head, but his body felt completely numb. The world whirled around him and turned black as air finally streamed back into his lungs. Art woke up with a scream that sounded more like a croaky whimper. This place he was lying in was cold, but soft, and as he blinked and grabbed hold of his glasses, he realized where he was. The car. He looked around, groaned, and felt a stinging pain in his throat, then back. No. He was in his car, lying on the back seat, but someone had left the door open. His throat felt so rough. Every breath was painful. His back was still sticky, and his knees and elbows burned like they had been scraped raw. Art pushed himself out of the vehicle, staggered and stumbled, then knelt down on the driveway. Not a dream. That was all he could think of. It hadn't been a dream. He could still feel his throat burning, his whole body aching. And even worse, the fear that now made his legs tremble thinking about going back in. But what was his alternative? Just leave and try to sell the house again? That would be impossible. And every month he wasn't able to sell it, that damned loan would accrue interest. His life was over. No, he couldn't run. Maybe the man in the picture would forgive him if he apologized. That giant had sounded reasonable at first, right? Arrogant, yes, but not aggressive. There had to be a way. Groaning, Art pushed himself up, grabbed his shirt and jeans from the car, dressed and tried to straighten his appearance. He would go in there and try to talk to him, tell him his side of the story, and convince him. Yes. The morning sun was already heating up the area as Art finally took a few painful sips of water. Once more tried to get the creases out of his clothing, and then went back to the front porch of the house. He knocked, waited, then unlocked the door. The house was as silent as one would imagine. Only one thing had changed since yesterday, and that were the giant shoe prints in the dust, leading from the back of the house to the front door. He had carried him out. That was a reasonable thing to do, right? At least it wasn't something a complete monster would bother with. Art quickly walked through the building that now looked just as shabby as the day before, and ascended the stairs, moving along the hallway until he found himself in front of the picture again. Even at first glance, he could see that something was different. The gaze in the eyes looked more sinister. The tension in the body was apparent. But the picture didn't move. Even as he stepped right in front of it, the body didn't shift, and no voice could be heard. Art opened his mouth to start his plea, then closed it again. He looked around. The house was back to its normal self. This part here also didn't feel like it had during his dream, or whatever that had been. There was no sticky stuff on the walls, and the man hadn't talked to him or done anything yesterday either. Art came to a decision. He stepped forward, grabbed the frame of the picture, and pulled the whole thing off the wall in a single motion. It was heavy, but bearable. There was no voice screaming at him or insulting him, but he felt the glare of the eyes even as he held up the frame. It didn't matter. If this thing only managed to physically harm him during the night, he'd be long done with it before then. Art carried the portrait and started to run. "4 hours. It had taken him a full 4 hours before he had returned. He had driven out along the dirt roads until he found a suitable spot, away from any prying eyes and dry underbrush, where he took care of the picture. He remembered the fear even now as he had driven out there, the music turned off, the windows closed, ready to scream and swerve if he had seen even a hint of that man coming out of his painting again. But he hadn't appeared. Nothing had gone wrong. Out there by the old gravel pit, he had finally gotten to work. Breaking the frame had turned out to be almost impossible. He had tried it, first by hand, then by stomping on it, and had only managed to make a crack after he had jumped repeatedly onto the small piece of wood. The canvas itself had been a different story, though. He'd taken a knife to it, cut it up, and watched the flakes of paint fall down as the fabric started tearing. Then he set it on fire and buried it. Art knew he had lost something he might have been able to sell to some wealthy idiot. But right now, standing back in this empty house, the relief he felt was priceless. No longer was there this lingering atmosphere of dread around him. The building itself felt lighter, the air cleaner, and even the dust on the floor less sticky. He was whistling to himself as he started carrying out the old crooked furniture, dumping it on the lawn. Should he get someone to carry it off, or just make it into a pyre and burn it? That was the only question he still held in his mind. At least until after the sun had already set, and slowly but surely tiredness started to set in. Art was still in the fourth room, one of the smaller ones, pulling down the mismatched and spots bloated wallpaper as the drowsiness hit him. He hadn't eaten all day and had survived on energy drinks and waves of adrenaline every time he had managed to get anything done for good. But now he could feel exhaustion setting in. Slumping with his back against the wall, he let his eyes fall shut and took a deep breath for a moment. It was doable, he told himself, and then could see weird colors floating behind his closed eyelids. Art grabbed hold of the wall at his back to steady himself. Just 15 minutes. He would rest for that period of time, then get on with it, he promised himself. The colors in front of his eyes started to take form. He could see it so clearly. A dark, moonlit backcountry road, and a figure pacing along the gravel path. The suit was old and cut up in places. Small wisps of smoke were rising from the figure's shoulders. It was carrying something in its hand. A frame, bent and broken in one spot. He could see it speeding up, and Art felt his heartbeat rising. There was an aggression to his steps he could immediately place. He felt himself swallowing hard, shifted his body in real life, and almost fell to the ground. As he looked up, he felt sweat running down his back. Now, it wasn't from the exhaustion of working hard for what seemed like the first time in his life. No, those beads were ice cold as they traced a path down his skin. Just a dream, right? No, something else was going on. The air around him felt heavy, and as he closed his eyes, he could see the almost same scene as before. Almost. The figure was walking with long strides along a dirt road, and at its end, Art could see a house with an old beat-up car in front of it, and light on in only 2 rooms on the ground floor. His pulse shot up, as did his blood pressure. He's coming. That was all he could think about. This wasn't a dream. He fumbled around for his phone, then stopped, turned, jumped out of the room and raced toward the front entrance. The night he could see through the small window in the door was far darker than he had expected. There were no stars in the sky, no moon he could see. It was like he was staring into an abyss, but the moment he reached the front door, he felt it. Those eyes were on him again. He turned the key once more and ducked, but the gaze remained on him anyway. Tears were shooting into his eyes. This was no joke. He needed to. Footsteps reached his ears from outside. Heavy ones. Art pushed himself off the door. He needed to run, to get away, to hide. He raced through the house and up the stairs, then heard someone at the front door.
You think you can lock me out of my own home? You low-born wretch.
The voice seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. Its anger and indignation were apparent in every single syllable.
I told you what I would do to you if I caught you in my house again, you dreaded scoundrel.
Art was jumping up the stairs as he heard the front door unlock from the first floor, then footsteps coming over the old wooden boards. He stifled a shriek as he jumped up the last few steps, turned and raced along the hallway. A place to hide. That's what he was looking for. The footsteps were already coming toward the stairs. Art turned the corner, jumped through a half-open doorway, and found himself inside an old bedroom. He could hear the thing downstairs coming up.
You low-born bastard! I will find you!
Art knew that only seconds remained until this thing followed him up here. He slid beneath the bed, clamped a hand over his mouth to stifle the sound of his breathing, and he listened to the footsteps coming from the stairs. A growl filled the air, and the steps never stopped. Art fished around his pockets. He had a screwdriver on him, but that was all. Would he be able to hurt this thing with that?
Come out, you coward!
The voice howled. The footfalls reached the door, then stopped.
I can smell your fear from out here. Come out and face me like a man.
The door swung inward and crashed against the wall. Art looked out from under the bed. Two shoes, still smoking and smoldering, were at the threshold. The man took a step inside, his long legs bringing him almost to the middle of the room. Art was trembling so much his glasses were almost slipping from the bridge of his nose. He could see the two shoes, massive, black and smoldering, waiting there so close to the bed. The burnt smell hung in the air, and Art almost screamed as he suddenly saw the man drop to his knees. His suit had deep cuts throughout it, and beneath, he could see red, blistered flesh as he got lower and lower, until finally, two eyes met his, and he noticed the burning hatred in them.
Got you.
The smoldering man hissed with pure, rage-filled delight as a giant hand shot out and grabbed his arm, then yanked him out from under the bed. Art screamed and stabbed at him with the screwdriver, but the man's smile never wavered, even as he pulled him up with one arm while the other one went to the handle of the knife behind the cut and burned belt. Art was driving along the road, a dirty rag still pressed to his face as blood was running down his chin and dripping onto his shirt. The pain was almost unbearable, but the fear drove him on. He could feel the cut burning every time he took a breath or even turned his head. The people of the town he was leaving behind looked at him as he passed through with pity. But no one seemed as surprised as they should have been. It was impossible, he thought. He couldn't go back to the house, and burning it down might set this thing free in the world. A tear was running down his cheek. The salt in it stung in a deep cut as it reached his chin. He had to try and sell it, swallow the loss. Anything would be better than ever setting foot in that place again. Because he knew, if he did, what would greet him upstairs would be the painting of the man, staring down at him again with blatant hate and disdain.